As some of you all may remember, a couple months ago, I purchased the Hornby Percy and the Circus train set. It was my first real Hornby train set, and also was what landed me my Hornby Percy. Though because I had a Bachmann Percy, I really wouldn't do much with the Hornby model. I would run him occasionally, but normally he would sit on the shelf. But though I would use the Bachmann Percy more, there are several problems with the Bachmann Percy that are very glaring, especially once you notice them. And this isn't me trying to diss on the Bachmann Percy too much, but the step ladders and the seam down his boiler, eventually it all becomes a bit much, especially when you have a Hornby Percy right there. I've just always been so scared to modify him. However, recently I would finally get the courage to do so. Quite unexpectedly too, and let me explain what happened. So a good friend of mine, George, or as some of you guys may know him, BoldOut95, had some Thomas faces up for sale on Twitter. Now, these faces were amazing, so the moment I saw them, I was like, hey, you still got those around? And he was like, psh, you know I got you, dude. And would actually end up sending me not only just the Thomas faces, but 2 Percy faces as well. Oh, and these awesome Thomas stickers. Geez, the vibes. And my first Ertl Caroline, who now resides on this flatbed. But while I had ideas for the Thomas faces, and those were bought for a specific project, the Percy faces weren't. And with how nice the faces themselves were, I wanted them to be put on something, you know, worth being on. Quick note, the faces themselves were designed by CoolDude7208 and Thomas Modeler1 on Twitter, and if any of you guys want any face repaints, model repaints, weathering, anything of the sort, my dude George at BoldOut95 has you too. He makes amazing models, and shout out to CoolDude and Thomas Modeler for making these amazing faces. So on a whim, I decided to put the faces themselves on my Hornby Percy. But the Hornby Percy, as a lot of you guys know, is, well, lacking in a lot of detail. He misses paint on his footplate entirely, his back lamp isn't painted either, and for some reason he has this horrible printed whistle on the front of his cab. But besides that, there's not really much to complain about. There are the common arguments that the 6 is a bit wonky, the chassis isn't exactly correct, and there are mold lines on his boiler. But as a whole, I would personally argue that that's much easier to work with than the Bachmann model. So I decided to finally man up and attempt to modify the Percy. But I needed to figure out what exactly I wanted to do. When it came to the footplate, originally I was going to do a white, but after looking at some reference pictures, more specifically the Railway Series illustrations of Percy, I really started to dig the black footplate, and decided that's what I would put on my model. And that's what I did, by masking up the entire body shell with tape, spraying a primer over it, and then spraying it with a dark black. As you can see here, it ended up a bit messy at first, but using a thumbtack and my hobby knife, I would go back and scratch off the excess paint, and try to clean it up a little bit more. I also wanted to paint his back lamp, so using a white paint pen, I would very carefully paint the entire thing a solid white. Unfortunately, this would take several coats, but eventually it got there. At some point, I decided that I wanted to give Percy cab details, or at least an interior, and to do so, I would use a spare Hornby T9 cab that I had. However, as you can see here, it is a bit big, and the motor for Hornby Percy isn't very small, so unfortunately I did have to cut it down a bit, but currently it resides right above the motor, and I think really helps to complete the model. At first I tried to use acetone to remove the printed whistle, but unfortunately this wouldn't work as well as I thought it would. So what I would end up doing is taking the Bachmann Percy whistle, stretching it out a little bit, and placing it directly on top of that whistle. And I think it really helps to hide what was once there, as well as complements the other small details that he already has. I also decided to paint his coupling hook a black and silver, that on the front and back, added a very small shovel on his side, added a much larger shovel on his back side to simulate a shovel rack like was illustrated here, and inside of his coal bunker is actual real coal. I used the residue from that to weather the entire model. And once all of that was done, all I did was use some matte spray to seal it all in. I used my Tamiya acrylics to give Percy a bit of a blush, and boom, my Railway Series / TV series mix of Percy was completed. Percy also has a headlamp, as you can see here, and this headlamp actually comes from the newer version of the Hornby Thomas. I would just remove it from him, blue tack it to Percy, and can blue tack it back to Thomas if I ever need to, so it switches between the two models. It really didn't take much to make this model, but nonetheless, it's one that I'm very satisfied with. It's still not perfect, but it's definitely enough for me, and though the modifications themselves weren't too serious, I really think they helped to make this model look a lot more alive, and I can't thank my homie George enough for even giving me the opportunity. If it weren't for him sending me the Percy faces, I likely would have never even thought to do this. But the moment I got them, I had to make a model that was worthy of wearing them. And personally, I think I've done pretty well. Also, just because I forgot to mention it, I did add a little bit of red on his brake pipe on the front. I'm not really sure why, I just thought it would look cool. And I was right, I do like it. But once all of that was done, the model itself was too. And now my railway has a much more proper Percy to pilot, deliver the mail, whatever I need him to do.
Percy is being put upon. I am.
So you might be wondering, well, if you did that with your Percy, what are you going to do with your Thomas faces? And my answer to that is, as some of you guys already know, tomorrow I have the privilege of going live with Train World at about 6 o'clock, and that Thomas model will be revealed during that, as well as on my Patreon a little bit early. So for those wondering what the Thomas faces are going to go to, be sure to tune in for that, and hopefully you guys enjoyed taking a look at how I made my Railway Series / TV series Percy. I know I keep saying it, but huge shout out to the homie BoldOut95 for giving me this opportunity, and if any of you guys need any commission work done, I highly recommend you give him a look. He does amazing stuff for models, and recently has really helped me take some of the models that I have a step further, especially in the face department. So with all of that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe since there's always more train stuff coming, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one, or at least at Train World tomorrow. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it.